so this is the end product. We're going to be using the disconnected model, and we're using WPF. So we're going to use some tabs here. We'll have our users. This set our users. We'll do add, update, and delete here. We'll have our grid view down here, and as we choose different users, you see them populate. You can choose the different flights associated with them. The flights come from the flights page over here, so we're going to have to be able to edit flights. So we choose different flights, change the airplane, do an add, update, and delete. Again, all through disconnected model. So we have a starter project ready to go. And in the starter project, there it is, there's the preview. We have 2 tabs already created. We have our combo box, add, update, and delete. We have some text boxes, grid view at the bottom, right? And looking at it from a code perspective, it's all just one main window.xaml file. So we'll start with a grid. We'll have a scroll viewer for each page, and within it, so here's the tab control. First tab item is users. Within it is a scroll view with a stack panel going horizontally for our combo box, add, update, and delete. And then we're going to have our text boxes listed below. And finally, a data grid to end it off, as well to close out that stack panel and scroll viewer, and close out the tab item. And if we scroll further, we have another tab item open for flights, and we'll have another scroll view. And you'll notice that if I click to this new tab item, all of a sudden the view updates to show me the new flight, the flight page, so I can easily just start editing right away. So we have our scroll viewer here. We have a stack panel going horizontally for our combo box, our add, update, and delete, and then below it our text boxes, and ending off the data grid to show previously entered information. All right. So this is the starter project. It has all the visual stuff ready to go. Now, what we need to do is we need to start with our data. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new file. All right. So we'll add new item. And you're going to go to data. And under data, you'll see DataSet. Right? Now, for lack of creativity, we're going to call it DataSet1.xsd. Just be careful that the parent object is DataSet. Right? So DataSet is the parent object. We're going to create a sub-object called DataSet1. You can call it whatever you want. That's more relevant to your project, but this is what we'll call it. So DataSet1.xsd, it will generate a DataSet1.xsd with a bunch of subfiles as well. Now, what we're going to have to do is we're going to be dragging and dropping our tables from our database into this visual dataset designer. So to do that, we're going to look at Server Explorer. I already have a connection created, but I'm going to walk through creating a new connection. So to create a connection to your database, and we're going to assume that we have SQL Server locally installed, but this applies also to databases on servers halfway around the world, so anywhere on the planet.
So a data set, right?
Yeah, so a new data set. So once you've added a new data set and you're in Server Explorer, we're going to click on this little icon here to create a new connection.
Like SQL, Microsoft SQL Server, and then Microsoft SQL Server database.
Oh yeah, so you might have a window before this, and there's probably a checkbox to say no, don't show it anymore. So yeah, look for SQL Server, not the file, but just SQL Server, and just hit OK. In fact, I think if I can generate it, no, there was a way to generate it for me. Oh, here it is. Actually, going to change. Yeah, this is what you might see first, actually. And so you're going to choose Microsoft SQL Server, and I had checked off always use a selection, so that's why I skipped ahead on me for that. But yeah, once you may come to this first, and then you'll just check off that and hit OK, and then this window comes up, and you're just going to use for your server name. You could possibly hit the drop-down part, and let's see if it'll find it for you. If not, you can open SQL Management Studio, which I will do. while it's searching and show you. Yeah, so it found mine, right? So my computer name slash SQL Express. If it doesn't find yours, right? So if you have SQL Manager Studio installed, your server name's right there. You can just copy and paste it there, right? We're going to use SQL Server Authentication or Mixed Authentication if that's what it says. My username and password is Jim Gordon and Batman, but whatever user you created for your database, go with that. Probably is Bob and Bob, so you can use that. Jim Gordon, mine. Password is Batman, all right? And select or enter database name. So mine's called prog32356 flight crew. I can test my connection. It says test connection succeeded. And hit OK. All right, so now inside Server Explorer, if I expand servers, and I expand data connection, there it is. So expanding the data connection, if I mouse over it, you can see that it's got my connection to the database in question. And this view looks very similar to SQL Management Studio. So if I was to pull up SQL Management Studio, you can see here by comparison, there's my database, similar folders over here, right? Not all, because you still, but similar, right? And so you're able to do some work directly in Visual Studio. You may still need SQL Management Studio for some major operations. So you can't just write off SQL Management Studio completely. If I expand tables, I have here two tables, flights and users. And the nice thing about this is all I have to do is just drag and drop each table into my designer. So in our case, it's basically saying that, yeah, we're kind of passing the username and password in plain text, but this is just for educational purposes, so we'll just hit OK. It's not production grade. Like we would follow better steps for security purposes. All right, so there's my flights table. I'm going to do the same thing for my users table. If there was any foreign key relationship, which we skipped over in this case, then you would see the arrows pointing between the two tables to indicate a foreign key relationship. But what you're seeing here is you're seeing visually, you're seeing your database already set up. And you're seeing two items. So you're seeing this portion here, this upper box, is really your data set portion. So it actually it's got the physical data. It has your rows, columns, and all the information behind it inside that part of the box. Now, we have here flight table adapter and users table adapter. These boxes handle the transaction. So doing your insert, update, delete, and your select. So it actually handles the transferring of data to and from the real database. So what you're seeing here is a snapshot of the data. All right, so now that you've configured your data set, most important thing, I'm going to hit Control S and make sure first off that I click somewhere in the space here to make sure that this is in view, and then do Control S to save. So my file is saved. Because at this point, and this is key, this is where the generation of all the code behind the scenes is done. So every time you do a save to your data set, it basically regenerates all the classes, objects, variables in C# that you're going to use to manipulate this. Right? So at this point, we have enough to work with. So we can switch over to our C# code and actually start working on this thing. So we're going to start with main window.xaml. So we'll start with the flights portion of the screen, and what we're going to do is we're going to code up all of the code we need for getting the flights page up and running. Before that, we actually have to bring in a NuGet package. And so I'm going to right click on the project name and manage NuGet packages. And we'll browse for system.data.sql client. There it is. We need to bring that in. So we'll hit install. Hit OK. Let it do its thing. Accept the license. Switch over to installed. And looks like it's installed. So everything is there. Now we can actually switch back and start coding this up. So I'm going to close this, the NuGet package, switch to my CS file. Here to the output. And now, first thing we'll do is we're going to import, or start with a using for system.data.sql client, and also using system.data as well. Now, looking back at our main window.xaml for a moment, I'm going to just put my cursor on the flights portion. This combo box down here, which is CMB aircraft, is going to have our aircraft listed. So we'll start by hard coding the information in that. So switching back to this, we're going to create a small list. So we'll start with private list of strings. Call it aircraft equals new. It was just there. There it is. List string. And inside our constructor, which you see down here, we can just start by hard coding that information. So we can do an aircraft.clear, and then just start adding aircraft. So aircraft.add for Boeing 777. Then aircraft.add for Boeing 787. Then aircraft.add for Airbus 330. Aircraft.add A220, so Airbus 220. Add Airbus 340. And we'll do one more, aircraft.add for Airbus 380. Right. And we can just fish this into our CMB aircraft. So we'll say CMB aircraft dot item source equals aircraft. And you can run to verify that that combo box has all of your stuff. Click run. scheduled flights. You see all of your aircraft there. So we're good for that. The next step we want to do is we want to get this data grid view to display all of our flights that are already in the database. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of other class variables. So first we'll instantiate our data set here. So say dataset1, call it ds1 equals new dataset1. And because we're doing a transaction, we're going to need the table adapter as well. So we're going to say dataset1 table adapters dot flights table adapter is, we'll call it TA flight equals, and we'll say new, there's dataset1 table adapters flights table adapter. We'll also need the data table as well. The data table will be the object that interacts with the data grid to display the data. So we're going to need a dataset1 dot flights data table, call it TBL flights equals new, and let autocomplete do its thing. There we go. All right. So this is enough. These are the class variables we need to get things up and running. So what we'll do is we're going to retrieve the data from the physical database. So we're going to call our table adapters fill method. Right? So back inside my constructor now, I'm going to continue on here and start by saying TA flight dot fill for ds1.flights. What this does is it actually goes to the physical database. It opens the connection using SQL connection. It creates a SQL command. It does an execute reader, right? All those classes, all those things that we learned about in the connected model, it's doing those, and it's going to retrieve the data and bring it back. So all the stuff we did in the connected model, all those lines and lines of code we wrote to get a database to retrieve and do a select has now been replaced by this one line of code, fill, right? And all the classes that we had to create ourselves, we had to, is already done within the data set DS1, right? All the objects we needed. So one line of code and boom, you already have your data at this point. So at this point, all right. So what we're going to do is, what we want to do is we want to be able to populate the grid view, right? And populate the drop down as well. I'm going to put this inside its own separate method. All right. So I'm going to call it here, and I'm going to create it right after. I'm going to say refresh flight grids. It's going to complain that doesn't exist. I'm going to generate it right now. Actually, I'll just type it out. So right below the constructor, we'll do a private void refresh flight grids. There. So now at least that issue's gone away. And in fact, what I think I'll do is I'm actually going to move this line inside refresh flight grids. So I'm actually going to cut it out or just move it here. Because we're going to be using this method over and over again. Every time we do an insert, update, and delete, we're going to have to refresh the grid anyway. So I've actually just moved that line here. Right? there. Because yeah, if we were to call it twice, it would just double the overhead there for no reason. Okay, so at this point, all we're going to do is now feed this information into our thing, so into our grid view. Actually, we're going to make one more call to fill. So we're going to say TA flight dot fill to DS1. Sorry, not DS1. This time we're going to say TBL flights. And now we'll do a DG flight view dot item source to equals TBL flight. There. At this point, you can run and verify that your grid view works.
Yeah.
All those lines of code that we wrote reduced down to a few lines of code. All right. Same with the combo box. All right, we're going to do that right now. Let's populate the combo box. So we'll continue on with refresh flight grids. Our combo box is called CMB flight. So I'm going to say dot item source is equal to TBL flights. All I have to do now is specify what am I going to display, or what column am I going to display from this table in the combo box, and if someone selects something, what will be the selected value, right? So we want the ID to be the selected value. So I'm going to say CMB flight dot selected value path is equal to ID. So spelling is important. If you use lowercase ID for your column there, then you want to use lowercase ID. So spelling is important in this case. Right, it's case sensitive. And then also CMB flight dot display member path is equal to flight number. So that's the name of my column, right? So you want to make sure that if you're using a different column name or it's a different case, you follow that case, right? If you use like a lowercase f or uppercase f or whatever, right? So you want to be very careful of that. Okay, now you can try again. Try running again. You can verify that your combo box also displays the correct information. Switch over to flights. You should see your combo box have the correct information. So now let's populate those text boxes with the information from the corresponding item that was selected in the combo box. So if I go back to my XAML file, I'm going to verify that under flights, the combo box that I have, I've already generated a method for selection changed called CMB flight selection changed, right? And so I'm going to switch over to the CS file and look for it. So there's CMB flight selection changed, right? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get the selected selected value, which is the row ID for the flight that was chosen. So I'm going to say int selected equals convert dot to int 32 for CMB flight dot selected value. Right? So selected should have the row ID of what I care about. Now the beauty of the data set is that it's already auto-generated all the methods I need for selection. So I'm going to just instantiate a data row object. So I'm going to say data row. It's an array. because we're doing a select, it's going to be a 2D array. But we're only putting one set of square brackets because by default, data row is already an array, a single D array, right? So by putting this extra set of brackets here, we're turning it into a 2D array. I'm going to call it dr equals ds1.flights dot, there's a select method. Within the select method, all I do is provide my where clause, right? It's going to select all the columns where, so like select star from flights where ID equals, and then plus selected. All right. So the select method, all it wants is the where clause. At this point, it's going to return back X number of rows. Because we're using an ID that's unique, right? It's auto-incremented. There's only going to be one row returned. We know it's one row, but select has the potential to return back more than one row, which is why you have a 2D array. But we know it's index 0 for this, right? We're just going to verify that our length is greater than 0 just for housekeeping purposes. So we'll say if dr.length is greater than 0, which it should be, then we'll go ahead and populate the text boxes. Right? So we'll say tb airline.text is equal to dr of 0 of airline. Of course, these names have to line up with your column names. .toString. And then tb flight num.text is equal to dr of 0 of flight num.toString. tb destination.text equals dr of 0 of destination.toString. And then finally, the combo box of the aircraft, so CMB aircraft dot selected item equals dr of 0 of airplane type. Dot toString. All right. Now you can run this again. You can try choosing different aircraft, or sorry, different flights, and you should see the text boxes populating properly. If there's a crash, chances are there's a spelling error with one of these column names.
The data row is like a
Flights, choose a flight. There we go. Everything's done. Yeah.
Like clicking on the top. The grid.
Yeah. Yeah, see how powerful it is? This data grid does a lot of work for you. Right? It saves you a lot of time. All right. So let's try inserting a new flight. So we've already created an event handler for insert, right? There's btn flight add, btn flight add click, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to that method. So look for it, btn flight add click. All right. So again, the data set's auto-generated methods that we need for generating a new row. So what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate a new row object. We'll say DataSet1 dot flights row. Let's call it f row equals ds1 dot flights dot new flights row. And all the columns already generated as variables because we've already, we've already generated everything through the dataset designer. So we'll say f row dot airline. So a variable called airline is already generated equals tb airline dot text. We'll say f row dot flight num equals tb flight num dot text. F row dot destination equals tb destination dot text. F row dot airplane type is equal to cmb aircraft dot selected item dot toString. Right? So we have this new row object that we've created. We've pulled the data from our text boxes and from the combo box. We're ready to apply this to our database, right? Add this new row to the database. First thing we do is we apply it to our cached copy, so our data set. So we'll say ds1.flights.rows.add for f row. All right. This line of code has now applied it to the data set, to our cached local copy of the database. Now I want to push this to the real database. So now we're going to say ta_flight.update for ds1.flights. All right. So at this point, if there's internet connectivity available on this device, it'll do a SQL connection, SQL command, do an insert into ... do the insert, execute scalar or execute non-query. It will verify correct insert and then close the connection and all that sort of stuff. All the stuff the connector model is doing behind the scenes. So if there isn't an internet connection, it'll wait. It'll wait till it can do this. And once it does, you're done. But what we need to do now is refresh flight grid so that we can now get an updated copy, just in case maybe somebody else was updating the same database table at the same time, right? Maybe adding another flight, maybe your coworker was adding another flight at the same time, right? So let's refresh the table, refresh everything, and get the latest copy of the database. So now let's run it and try and add a new flight. All right, switch over to flights. I'm gonna try, let's see here. We have American Airlines, Air Canada, WestJet, United Airlines, Emirates, why not? They're everywhere. So we'll see, I think it's like EA, I don't know, 665 going to Dubai. And they typically, I only ever see an Airbus 380 with them. So we hit add. And we can see Emirates, EA665, Dubai, Airbus 380, ID16. You can see how many times I've been operating on this database, so much. And if I go to my drop down, I see EA665. I can just try a different airline and switch back. And I can see all the information that I've entered. So now we have an add that works properly. All right, so let's do update and delete now. So we have a BTN flight add. There's a BTN flight update. So again, we'll grab the selected index from the combo box by saying int selected equals convert dot to int 32 for CMB flight dot selected value. And we're going to do a select to retrieve the row that was selected based on the ID. So we'll say again data row dr equals ds1 dot flights dot select where ID equals and then plus selected. Now we'll just update the rows. So we'll say dr of 0 of airline equals tb airline dot text. We'll say dr of 0 of flight num equals tb flight num dot text dr of 0 of destination equals tb destination dot text. And then dr of 0 of airplane type equals CMB aircraft dot selected item dot toString. All right, now let's push this update to our actual database by saying ta flight dot update for ds1 dot flights and then we'll do a refresh flight groups. And now you can try it out, try and update. So I guess I'll choose the Emirates flight I added, and I'll just add, a letter to each one, an extra digit, change the airplane, hit update, and you can see in my table that all the updates I did happened. If I switch airlines, go back to that, right? And you can see that the updates have loaded. All right. Now the last one for the flight is delete. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to retrieve the selected value from the combo box. So say int selected equals convert to int32 for CMD flight dot selected value. And we'll retrieve the row again. So say data row dr equals ds1.flights dot select where id equals and then plus selected. Right, but this time we're just going to delete the row. So we'll just do a dr of 0 dot delete. That'll delete the row for us. Then we'll just push that update back to the server. So we'll say ta flight dot update for ds1 dot flights. And then finally a refresh flight grids. And you can run it and you can delete that row now. Switch to flights, switch to Emirates, hit delete. Now you can see the Emirates flight is deleted. You can see that it's removed here as well. All right, so now flights is done. If you look at users, now we have a user page to work with, right? But there's two things about the users. Like there's the users themselves, but the users have a flight associated with them inside this combo box here. So we actually need to add in the flights into this combo box. So we're going to jump back to the CS file, and we're going to first jump back to our refresh flight grids. There it is, refresh flight grids. And we're going to add a little bit more code to this. So that combo box was called CMB next flight. So we're going to say CMB next flight dot item source is also equal to TBL flights. And then we'll say CMB next flight dot selected value path is equal to ID. And CMB next flight dot display member path is equal to flight number. All right, you can run it. Now looking at the users page, we can verify that we have that combo box populating with our flights as well. Right? So you can see the flights are here in this combo box too. So now when we actually update our users, we can associate a flight with it as well. So now let's focus on the users and getting the user data grid to populate with its information. So let's start by going up to the top and look at the variables we defined. So we defined a flights table adapter, we defined a flights data table. We do the same thing for users as well. So I'm going to continue on with a couple more variables. I'm going to say DataSet1 dot users table adapter. Sorry, DataSet1 table adapters dot users table adapter. Call it TA users equals new DataSet1 table adapters dot users table adapter. We also need to define a dataset one dot users data table, call it TBL users, equals new dataset one dot users table adapter. Sorry, users data table. Okay. So now we have all the variables that we need to work with this. So let's create a refresh user grids method similar to the refresh flight grids method that we created. So I'm just going to call it first so I don't forget. I'm going to say refresh user grids. It's going to complain it doesn't exist, and that's okay. We'll create it right here. We'll say private void refresh user grids. We'll start by doing a couple of fills. So we'll say TA user dot fill for ds1 dot users. And we'll do a TBL users dot fill. Sorry, TA user dot fill for TBL users. Right? Now we can fish this information into both the table and the combo box at the same time. So we'll say DG users dot item source is equal to TBL users. And let's do the combo box at the same time. So we'll say CMB users dot items source is equal to TBL users. And then we'll say CMB users dot selected value path is equal to ID. CMB users dot display member path equals name. We'll just put the username. Now run it and let's have a look at our user page and see that the data is being fished into the user grids and combo box. So you should see your grid view displaying and your combo box displaying users. And we still have our flights available as well. Okay, so we've got our refresh user grids in play. Let's start with our selection change for our combo box so we can get the text boxes to populate. We already have a selection change method generated. So if I go to, where is my combo box? Actually, there it is, CMB users, selection changed. It is called CMB users selection changed. Right there. So I'm going to switch over to my CS file and look for that. So there's CMB user selection changed. We'll do a select by saying int selected equals convert dot to int 32 for CMB users dot selected value. right? Now we can do a select, grab the row in question. So we'll say data row dr equals ds1.users.select, where ID equals, and then plus selected. Now, assuming the length is greater than 0, so if dr.length is greater than 0, then we'll populate our text boxes. So tb name.text is equal to dr of 0 of name. Now, of course, our columns need to line up. So .toString, and then tb email.text is equal to dr of 0 of email .toString, tb address.text equals dr of 0 of address .toString, tb age.text equals dr of 0 of age .toString. And finally, now we're getting the flight, right? So the flight will come from, so CMB next flight dot selected value is equal to dr of 0 of flight dot toString. Right? And now you can give it a run, and every time you select a user, you should see the option to view that person's information in the text boxes. So should see different items pop up. All right, so let's do the add. There's already a CMB users add method, so we're going to jump into that. And we'll start by creating a new row object. So we'll say DataSet1 dot users row. We'll call it uRow equals ds1 dot users dot new users row. And we'll say uRow dot name, because all of the columns have been generated as variables, equals tb name dot text uRow dot email equals tb email dot text uRow dot address equals tb address dot text uRow dot age is equal to, now this gets interesting, if I try a tb age dot text, it won't like it because it's an int. Yep, we need to do a convert. So we'll do a convert dot to int 32 for tbh dot text. And also same idea for the flight. So let's say uRow dot flight is equal to convert dot to int 32 for CMB next flight dot selected value there. So now we have our new row. Okay. So now let's add it. So say ds1.users.row, rows with an S, dot add for new row. And we can do a TA users dot update for ds1.users. And then finally a refresh user grids. Okay, now you have enough to run, add a new row, see what happens. All right. So I'm going to add Yoda. Say Yoda at Jedi.com. Let's say he lives at 998 Jedi Way. Say he's 999. His next flight is on a WestJet flight 633. Hit add. You can see that Yoda has been added in the grid. You can see Yoda is here in the combo box. And if I select away to like Bones, for example, I switch back to Yoda, you see his information is there. Okay, so for update, we already have an update method right there. So first let's do our select. So we'll say int selected equals convert dot to int 32 of CMB users dot selected value. Right. So we got the row in question. All right. So let's grab the row that we're going to edit. So say data row dr equals ds1.users.select for where ID equals and then plus selected. All right. So we know it's only one row coming back because IDs are unique. So we'll say dr of 0 of name equals tb name dot text. Dr of 0 of address equals tb address dot text. Dr of 0 of email equals tb email dot text. Dr of 0 of age equals tb age dot text. And finally, dr of 0 of flight equals cmb next flight dot selected value dot toString. There. So at this point, we've got the data from the text boxes and the combo box. We're just going to push this update. So we'll say TA users dot update for ds1 dot users, and finally refresh user grids. And now you have enough to run and try and update. Okay. So I'll choose Yoda. I'll add just a letter to each entry and a digit to his age, and change his flight to like an Air Canada flight. Hit update. And you can see the row has updated in the grid view. And if I switch away in the combo box to another user and then come back to Yoda, all of the updates are there as well. So now that only leaves delete. All right, so delete is even easier. Delete's the easiest out of them all. So first we grab our selected, so we'll say int selected equals convert.toInt32 for CMB users dot selected value. And then we'll say data row dr equals ds1 dot users dot select where id equals and then selected. Then it's just a dr of 0 dot delete. To delete that row, push that update by saying ta user dot update for ds1 dot users, and then finally refresh user grids. And that's it. Now we're going to run this, verify our delete. Now we have a fully functioning app. All right, so I'm just going to choose Yoda and delete Yoda. There, Yoda's gone from my grid view, and he's no longer in my combo box. All right, so we have an insert update delete for users. We have an insert update delete for our flights, and that is the disconnected model.